Well, I want to take a few minutes to talk about how to answer this particular problem from the homework, which focuses on a set of test scores for a college algebra exam. And in it, you are asked to group things, find summary statistics, and so forth. So let's see if we can work on this problem together. So here I have the question in statcrunch, in my homework. And what I would probably say to you first of all is I have the homework problem or the homework screen pulled up on the left hand side, and I went ahead and I opened up statcrunch in a separate window, and I'm displaying it on the right hand side over here. So the question asks me to construct a relative frequency distribution of the data that is in this problem, and here is the data that you see. So in order to do that, I'm going to copy the information over into statcrunch by clicking that icon, copy to clipboard, and it's highlighted everything in there. So off the keyboard, I'm going to hit Control-C. So it copied my information for me, and I am going to paste it by clicking the cell over here in statcrunch and hitting Control-V. So these are the test scores from my problem that we're looking at, and I now want to create a relative frequency distribution for these test scores. You have two ways to be able to do this in statcrunch. First, you can come up here to data, you can bin the data, and then you would go to tables and create your relative frequency table based on your binned data. That's one way to do it. An alternate way to do it is to take the raw scores that we already have, and I can only do this when I have raw scores like this. And instead of creating a table, let's go ahead and graph it. So I'm going to create a histogram of that test scores. So I'm going to make a histogram, a relative frequency histogram, with bins that start at 30, because it told me starting at 30 with a class width of 10. So I want my bins to start at 30 with a class width of 10. And I am going to compute it now. So what I have here is the histogram that represents those test scores that you saw. How does that help me fill in a table, however? Well, if I hover my mouse over each one of these bars, you can see that I get not only the class for each of those bars, but I also get the relative frequency for that particular class width. So for this first leftmost bar, which has a class of 30 to 39, that's what we're going to put in statcrunch. On your screen, you can see that it says 30, 40, but we can't include 40. That's what the parentheses means. So for statcrunch, or for the purposes of this homework problem, we have a class with a width of, for the first bin has a class width from 30 to 39, and the relative frequency for that bin was 0.025, and it came because I hovered my mouse over that bin. So 0.025. Now when I click on the next, when I hover over the next bar, you can see that this has a class width from 40 to 49 and a relative frequency of 0.25. So I'm going to go through my table over here on the left hand side, and I am going to fill in the classes and the relative frequency based on the information that you see here in statcrunch. Okay, so I have my first part of the question answered, the class widths as long as also their relative frequencies, and I did that basing it off of the histogram that I used, or the histogram that I drew in statcrunch from the raw data that was given to me. So the next portion of this question says, we'll draw the histogram. I've already done that, so I can choose my histogram picture appropriately. And the next thing it asks me to do in this question, and the next thing it asks me to do is to then go through and find out some summary statistics on my data. Remember that the summary statistics all come from the data here for the test scores, the raw data for the test scores. Those come from stat, summary stats, and I'm going to take the summary stats of the raw test scores. So I'm going to need to find the median. It asks me for the mean and the median. It's also going to ask me for the standard deviation as well as the IQR because I've already seen the problem. So I have all of the data that I need, and I can always go back and add more to it if I didn't get these done in the first time. So when I find the mean over here, when I type in the mean for the test scores, that would be 78.275 and 79 for the median, which I got it right. Then it asks me some other questions that I would need to answer here. Standard deviation is given as well, or it asks me, for the standard deviation, which I can find using the summary statistics that I already did. So we have 15.5. Got that right. Now, the remaining questions, because there's two parts left to this question, deal specifically with the probability of selecting a student who made some sort of score on the test. Okay, what's the probability of selecting a student who fails the homework or who has a score of less than 70? Well, remember that we have a table up here which basically gives me those probabilities. So if I have a student who made less than a 70, then that means that this student, that means that I would have scores from 0.025 added to 0.025, 0.05, and 0.125. In other words, the sum of all of the probabilities that are less than 70. And that's how I would answer this question. And then it's a similar process with the next question. So I hope that helps you figure out how to create a relative frequency distribution when we are grouping the data.